Welcome back. Another Wright Stew podcast. We're back in studio.
Yes. Speaker studio.
Speaker studio. So we're back back together again. Always a fun time sitting across the table here with Brian. Talking sports. Tonight we are going to talk about super teams. Are they good? Are they bad? What ramifications do they have for sports? That's where we're going.
Yeah. And I think, what made me think about this, obviously, is the teams in baseball specifically that are spending so much money. And, you saw the Dodgers obviously win the World Series. You saw them essentially put together a super team. They've given out tons and tons of money and they're continuing to sign more guys. And, essentially their liabilities are going to be over $1 billion. There's no question when you think about Ohtani and Snell and those guys that they've signed. And so it made me think about, hey, are super teams and are they good for sports, right? You think about, when you think about super teams, you think about a handful of teams in the past. And Paul and I, we talked about the subject, but we haven't really talked about really how we're defining it. So we may be a little bit different, and I think we'll eventually come together on some things and some ideas. But
yeah, so I'll give you my definition of what I think a super team is.
Okay.
So I think a super team is constructed of one player who is currently on the roster.
Okay.
And then you're adding pieces around him via free agency, maybe the draft, right? And when I think super team, the first organization that comes to mind is the NBA, right?
Interesting.
Because the NBA, definitely two players can have a huge impact on your roster, right? And because you're playing offense, you're playing defense, you control the ball.
Yeah.
Two players is 40% of the team, and realistically, you can be 75% of the team if you want. You don't have to share that ball in basketball.
That's right.
And I think that's where the NBA really separates and differentiates itself. And there's been a lot of super teams. The one that comes to mind kind of in our lifetime that really, really stands out is the Miami Heat team.
Yeah.
So, to my definition, right, LeBron James, Chris Bosh took their talents to South Beach, teamed up with Dwayne Wade, and then Eric Spoelstra, the coach there, has become a really great coach. But there was some talk early on,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting when you think about, and I agree 100%. That was one that I came up with as well, and that's definitely, Spoelstra really, you didn't really know what he was, right? I mean, that's what's incredible. To be able, you got to have a pretty strong personality. I think he was probably underrated as a coach, but clearly has done it even without some of those great players. But yeah, whenever I started looking up, and obviously we had to do a little research on this one. This wasn't just top of head type stuff. And so, but basically what you said, like generally 2 or 3 players that are considered top 10 or top 15, right? And that definitely would have fit that definition. The one after them would have been the Golden State Warriors with Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, and Klay Thompson. Right,
and so Steph and Klay were homegrown, and Draymond Green was there.
Yeah,
right, and then you add arguably the best top 3 guy with KD, right, and that took them to the next level. So
how about baseball? Anything come to mind with baseball?
So baseball is interesting, right, with no salary cap.
Yeah.
So maybe the first super team ever, the 1927 Yankees.
Yes.
Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig.
Yes.
And that's Murderers Row, right? That's a fabled team, and something like 8 Hall of Famers on that roster, coaching staff, whatever it is.
Yes.
But if you start looking, so Babe Ruth famously came from the Red Sox.
That's right.
If you kind of look back, a lot of the players came from because the Red Sox were like floundering financially, and weren't wildly invested in winning ball games, so they were just kind of pilfering.
So I know it was $100,000 that they got from Babe Ruth, but I didn't realize the Red Sox were actually floundering.
There was a couple of other teams, right? So financially, they were scuffling, and
Interesting.
So the Yankees said, "Here's some money. We'll take your
Babe
best
Ruth.
players."
Yeah,
and so they did that. So the 27 Yankees, and that went on to be a couple other championships throughout time. So that's the first one. So baseball's a little different though, because if you look at best teams.
Yeah.
Best teams doesn't always equate to World Series victories, right? Famously the 01 Mariners, 116 wins, most in the regular, and kind of in the modern era. The 06 Cubs had 116 wins as well, but the 01 Mariners lost in the ALCS to to the Yankees, who eventually lost to the Diamondbacks in that World Series, right? So
Yeah, and that's a hard one though, right? I mean, you think about there's been teams that, and we talked about it. Your Brew Crew, they went all in and got CC right
yeah,
that one year, and so I almost think it's got to be kind of over an extended period of time to
Yeah.
where 2, 3, 4 years. And the Yankees forever have been one of those teams that have always been willing to spend money,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
And as a fan of the sport, you love to hate them. Honestly, I mean, my dad is a Yankees fan, but
So are you a Yankee hater?
I wouldn't say hater.
Who was your favorite team growing up?
So, we didn't really have a team locally, right?
So we both grew up in North Carolina, so it was
you didn't have, some people were Orioles, a lot of people were Atlanta because of TBS. You
Yep.
could watch Braves all the time.
I was a Cubs fan because of WGN, so I would get home and watch the Cubs every day.
And somehow I ended up a St. Louis Cardinals fan because of Ozzie Smith.
Okay, you
Um,
like the backflips?
Maybe I liked the dives up the middle. He was
Okay,
just
that's
such an athlete. I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
My favorite players growing up, Ozzie Smith would have been really high up there, and then next would have been Griffey, even though he would have crossed over kind of as I was trying to get in and trying to play.
Yeah.
But dude, those just super athletic.
Well, those
So yeah, I was a
80s
Cardinals guy.
Those '80s Cardinals teams was Willie McGee.
I loved how
Ozzie
Willie
Smith.
ran. It was so goofy. I tried to run like Willie McGee when I was 8, 9, 10
a little
years old.
pigeon-toed, but wildly fast.
He could fly for whatever. So I thought if I ran pigeon-toed, I would
Vince
be able to.
Coleman.
Yes. Yes.
Tommy Hurt, and then you had like Jack Clark, the big donkey in the middle,
Yes.
hitting home
I love
runs.
that you can pull all these names because I can't pull them.
Pedro Guerrero was around that time,
Yes.
so I mean a lot of.
So
but
that was my team.
Super athletic. You're right.
Yes.
Super athletic.
Fun to watch. A lot of bases stolen. A lot of first to third. A lot of
Bunts,
singles and the
pushing
doubles.
balls, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of bunts. And stuff as a very 80s baseball team.
Yeah.
But stuff as a young kid, you could imagine yourself being able to hit a double. Some of those kids, or some of those grown men at that time, obviously, they're hitting bombs. I couldn't relate
Yeah.
to some of those guys, but the 80s Cardinals, very much so.
Yeah, that's good. So they were kind of a mini dynasty during that era. They were a mini super team, but I think they did it from, Ozzie Smith came over from the Padres in a trade, but McGee was a Cardinals guy.
Yeah,
Vince Coleman, Cardinals
and
guy.
I think we almost got to define and separate the two.
Yeah.
Right.
And so hold on, let's get back to
All
the
right, go
original point. So you're talking about the Yankees. Love to hate the Yankees.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
a Cardinals
Yeah.
fan.
Did you have a team that you loved to hate?
I was to love to hate. No, I was a Cubs fan. So I didn't like the Cardinals very much. The Expos always seemed to give the Cubs. I mean, the Cubs weren't great. They
had some good years.
The '89 Cubs, the boys of Zimmer, will forever be my favorite team. I've literally my little. I'll post a picture of it on our Instagram. Over here, there's a little starting lineup. So starting lineups were a toy in the '80s and '90s, like these little figurines that were of baseball players.
Oh, I love
So
it.
it's not Mookie, it's not a Cabbage Patch, but it's a little figure. So I've got one that's like the team edition, and it's of the '89 Cubs. Love those guys. But I didn't really hate any team at all. I knew there was like kind of natural rivals for the Cubs.
Right.
I guess I didn't like the '89 Giants very much because Kevin Mitchell and Will Clark just destroyed.
And they were just
And then
kind
that
of
was
mean
the-
looking.
Yeah, and that was the '89 was the World Series with the earthquake and everything, the Bay Series. So, but didn't really. And so with me.
Okay.
With the New York Yankees, right? They have been super teams. They bought a lot in the free agency. The one thing that I really push back on those '90s Yankees teams.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's they bought it. But look,
a lot of guys came through their farm
Derek
system.
Jeter, Yankees guy. Jorge Posada, Yankees guy. Bernie Williams, Yankees guy. Andy Pettit, like all these guys. The middle of the lineup who is supposed to be that's like or up the
core.
middle defensively. That was their core. And then they added an aging Wade Boggs.
True.
Charlie Hayes played third base for him for a little bit. Then you start adding other guys.
That's interesting, though.
Giambi and things.
Yeah, Giambi. They definitely brought in some killers.
But the core of that, the nucleus of that
actually
team, who you were sitting there thinking about, like that
was farm grown.
Those were farm. Yeah, And I think the Yankees, they were good at that. And there were other teams like that in the same frame. The Braves.
Oh yeah, and that's historically what they've
Braves
done.
historically brought up a lot of guys. And then they got Smoltz in a trade, sort of thing. But Maddox from free agency really put him over the top. But
Cubs guy.
Yeah, Cubs guy, right? 89 Cubs.
Yeah.
But I never really hated them. I always appreciated those Yankees teams for what they were. There needs to be somebody at the top to set the standard.
Yeah.
And that's why like the Patriots came that in the NFL is right. Like I never hated the Patriots. Like I wanted the Panthers to beat them when they were in the Super Bowl.
Right.
But I appreciated what they did and who they were. If you don't have a team setting the standard, like what do you got?
All right, so I looked at it a couple different ways, and I really distinguished like dynasty versus super team, right? Because dynasty, obviously, the Patriot teams, I think we looked up like 6 and 20 years, right?
Yeah,
or
like
3
they
and
played in 9 Super Bowls. Over
yeah,
a
I mean
20-year
something
period.
crazy, which clearly is a dynasty, but they never overpaid guys. They never overpaid guys.
If anything, they let guys go.
They let guys go early.
Yeah,
and so I think about, and again, you could argue they acquired a lot of a talent, and I felt like that was almost in a different category. And really, I didn't have any football guys in there. I did have the '90s Yankees in here.
Yeah.
But it really, like you just corrected me, essentially, that's really not accurate. Really not accurate. I think some of the earlier teams, you definitely could have said that, and maybe some of their later teams, you could have said that. Honestly, if they were, and they're competing for championships now, you could almost say they've tried to do it now, right?
Yeah.
With Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. And
Judge is a Yankee guy that came up Yankee.
So he was a Yankee guy. Stanton was, who did he come up with?
was not. Stanton came up with the Marlins.
And obviously,
and then Soto last year with Yankee. But they've added some pieces, right? And A-Rod famously went over there. But interesting you talk about football as well, right?
Okay.
So I looked up the records, the best records in the NFL, right? The Patriots, the 07 season, they went 16-0, lost in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The 72 Dolphins, the only undefeated, 14-0, won the Super Bowl. Our Panthers went 15-1, lost in the Super Bowl in 15. The 85 Bears went 15-1, won the Super Bowl. One of the best defenses of all time. The 11 Packers 15-1, lost in the division round. The 98 Vikings lost in the conference championship. They were 15-1, 84. But I start looking at the commonalities of these teams, and the thing that really came to mind of all these teams, the things that I can name were the quarterback, the head coach, and maybe a couple of other skill players, right? And so I think in football, it's really very quarterback heavy, very quarterback led.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think that's the reason they all chase it, and they chase the quarterback, trying to find that next Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. And so I definitely think that's there's a clear path, I feel like, with football. You got to get your quarterback right. You got to get your head coach right. You got to play defense. And if you get all those combinations right, you can at least be really competitive. If you don't have some of those things right, you're not going to be competitive. And so I went very heavy baseball and very heavy basketball. So we mentioned a couple already. I kind of looked at it from a perspective, like, I'm not sure how we'll end up titling this thing, but are super teams good or bad for sport? And so I tried to look up some stats in regards to, hey, was their attendance higher? Number one. Mm-hmm. Or was their viewership higher? Number two. And honestly, it was. I mean, and specifically, specifically for the Heat. And I'll have to dig in here just a little bit to find this stuff.
I wouldn't say I'm a big NBA fan, but I was watching all the Heat games that year. It was a spectacle. I wanted to see what was happening. And then they lost that first finals, and so you talk about teams people love to hate.
That was it.
Yeah. That team was just a lightning rod.
And so you really need a villain. Right, you need a villain in sport, and I think that's part of the reason
they call it a heel in wrestling. A heel,
yeah, absolutely. And they're trying to do that banana ball, right? You got the animals that play the banana players that are, so they try to do some of that. And I'll dig into this a little bit. I think the attendance for the Miami Heat, I believe it was like 30 or 40% increase.
Yeah.
And their viewership was like 60 or 70. I mean, it was a ridiculous number. And so, and even the same thing with like the Yankees. And I realized last year, like, in 2023, so it might not have been last year. I think it was 2023. The attendance or the viewership has went down so much in baseball, and we can almost circle back around to Golden Helmet if you wanted to. But the viewership had went down constantly. But when those teams are in it, and part of it is they're big market teams. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are big
people
fans.
Live in New York.
That's right. And then part of it is that those super teams, you ain't got to watch 3 games to see 3 great players. You got to watch one game. And I think it does. I was going to say, my initial reaction was it was not good for sport at all. Okay. But the numbers, when you look at overall interest, you look at viewership, you look at attendance in the stands, they have all these numbers available. And it was clear that it was better. It was better.
Yeah. No, again, I think I 100% agree. I appreciate a villain. And I'm pretty net neutral on most teams. It takes a lot for me not to like a team.
Right.
So having, again, those villains are usually really, really good players or good teams. Charles Barkley famously had his Nike commercial, "I'm not a role model."
Yeah.
Right? He kind of set himself up as a villain. And people loved it. You love to love him, you love to hate him. He's great. He became great now. He became very lovable.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the time, he was polarizing.
Oh, very much so.
He just wanted to go out there, win games, throw elbows, the round mound,
gamble a little bit,
gamble, play some terrible golf, right?
Yeah, terrible golf swing. I mean, I've got a terrible swing, but his is terrible.
So there's that, and then again, the Yankees, the evil empire. People love to hate him.
Yeah.
The Patriots. Why do they hate? Because they have more, or is it like they have more money? They're better,
I don't think in that case
they're better looking. They get the prom queen.
Not
is that what we're talking about?
I mean, Tom Brady was a good-looking fella, but
he's a good-looking guy. Handsome.
I would say we almost could go a different route, right? Like, why do people hate winners, right? And there is something to maybe digging into deeper in kind of human nature.
Yeah.
If you're not winning and somebody else, it's different if there's a bunch of different teams winning.
Yeah.
Like in football, outside of the Kansas City, there's a bunch of different teams that are very competitive. But it feels like there for a long time, football, it was the Patriots and then somebody else was going to play them. And if it wasn't the Giants, they weren't going to beat them. And baseball, it's the Yankees are always there. Back to kind of the super team argument.
Yeah.
And if you don't spend money, though, I respect as a fan base and not a fan of obviously the Yankees, I respect that they spend money and are willing to put together a super team.
So you bring up an interesting point, right? So super teams good, but on the flip side, do you think parity?
Well, that's a good question.
Is good in sports? Let's say pro sports for
for sure. I'm gonna shoot it back to you, and I'm gonna think about it. I think initially. I'm gonna go no.
I think parity's terrible for sports.
Yeah.
I don't want a new champion every year.
Oh, you don't?
No. I love back to back. I love three-peats. I love seeing people because again, played at AAA. Nobody cares about a minor league championship, but it's hard to win a conference. It's hard to win a game.
Right.
It's hard to win a conference championship. It's hard to win a state title. It's hard to win.
And to do it twice,
a national title, an NBA, whatever. To see that level and to understand what it takes to get there the first time, and then to have the target on your back, take everybody's best shot and do it again. That is special. Like, I appreciate those dynasties, those super. I think it's great.
So that's interesting. I thought you were going to go a different way. I thought you were going to be like, nah, because
people say so. My wife, for example, we were talking like, they win too much. I want to see somebody. But why? What? Because they do things better?
Yeah.
Because they've got it figured out. They've got better coaches. Maybe they've got a better strength and conditioning coach who gets them prepared. Maybe they've got a better trainer. One of my friends, he's the trainer for the Dodgers. Greg Baraja won a World Series this year as the trainer, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they're doing things better. I heard the Oregon head coach talking the other day. and they were talking about preparation. So it's kind of different because you're preparing for two teams potentially.
Right.
But he was going into the most minute detail about how they travel across the country and how they're preparing their guys and making sure they get rest on the plane. How they're doing, and it's those little things that separate the really good from the elite, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. And obviously football essentially tries to make every team. It used to be 8-8, maybe it's 8-9 or 9-8 now. So they try to make every team 500. Baseball, I don't feel like that's the case. Like I feel like there's teams that are really trying to win.
Yeah.
And then I feel like there's teams that are just trying to make money, right? I mean, you think about Pittsburgh Pirates historically. A lot of great players have come up through the organization and done great things for the Yankees or somebody else. And
that feels like that's the NL Central, the Pirates,
like
Reds,
the 4A team, right? It's not the
Brew Crew,
I mean, now the Brewers, I feel like at least in the last handful of years have held on to a lot of guys. I know they've lost some of them, but I know they put in.
Corbin Burns went to the Orioles.
So
Willie Adames just went to the Giants.
But I think they offered them
Sabathia. They did, but we talked about the other day. CC Sabathia went to the Yankees.
Right.
They just can't do it. And they've been David Stearns prior to with the Mets now, but he did a great job of building that farm system and really that's
interesting.
And that's part of you get these guys on the rookie contracts.
So you
think guys take the veteran minimum in different leagues.
So you think like the Braves historically, and I would. I know they haven't won a ton of World Series, but man, what a great.
But they're always in the NLCS.
Always in the mix.
They're always in the mix.
Yeah. So you think them always being in it, and like I don't know, you probably can name a team that's always at the bottom, but whoever is always at the bottom, you like to see Atlanta always in it. You don't ever want to see them pull back.
Why penalize them for doing the right thing? Why penalize them for being good? Why penalize them for having smart people, talented people, understanding how contracts work?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And I don't know if penalize is the right word, but pull against. I would say different. So you're
so the league's trying to, like you said, penalize for different things.
Yeah.
And people pulling against and it's jealousy.
It is. It is. Kind of we go back to the root of why you think that. That's what I was going to. Kind of human nature is very much jealousy. And it's very much a situation where unfairness and really nothing's fair, right? But you just got to deal with whatever you got and kind of move forward. And there have been teams with deeper pockets that have really taken advantage, and I feel like have tried to create these super teams. But obviously in basketball, it used to be a lot easier. Now with their salary cap, it's a lot different.
There's some max contracts and super max and that sort of thing.
And essentially now, until there's a new agreement, they're limited on what they're able to do. So the super teams, what they showed after this, really, you got a big bump from organization-wise. Those numbers I was talking about, Golden State was up 20%, over their viewership, but it starts to peel back, right? There's kind of this, hey, I'm used to seeing it. Yeah, there's
that was always the thing too with after the Braves won their 12th straight division title, we're in the and to be fair, it was a couple of day game playoff game.
People weren't showing up anymore.
They weren't going to play there. The first round. We've been here 12 times, or who cares? So there was some winning fatigue, and it's good to have those problems, I guess.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's in Atlanta's never been known as a huge super fanatical fan base.
But dude, that ballpark down there is pretty awesome.
Oh, the new one's beautiful.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, it's done the right. That's how ballparks, and I'm sure everyone would like to. I'm sure it's not cheap. But that's how ballparks should be done.
Yeah, and I think the Rays are going to model their new facility.
So that is going to happen.
Yeah. That's the way. As long as they pass that bond, they're good to go. So clearly not going to be at the Trop this year. So
well, it's an interesting concept, and I thought you were going to go a different way. That's the reason we didn't speak on this and try to know each other's answer in advance. But I think ultimately you need a heel, you need a villain, you need a team that everybody's trying to pull against.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's good for sports. But baseball's so different, man, because even if you put together these super teams, there's something to that chemistry. We always thought, and I know baseball's different, right? You don't have to go and know plays, but there is something to, there's some magic, intangibles. There's some magic that that's kind of undefinable with certain teams.
Well, I may differ with you here a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm not a huge chemistry guy.
Oh, interesting.
I'm all like I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's good to love your teammates, to like your teammates.
And I would say different than like your love, but
Yeah.
there's just something like there's always a guy who gets to hit in a big situation.
Have a little mojo. Yeah, so my son and I watched the 04 Red Sox.
Yes.
A lot of Kevin Millar was kind of that guy who, and you kind of need a guy, but famously, like the 70s Oakland A's did not like each other. The old adage was like 25 guys walk out of the clubhouse, they get in 25 different cabs, go their 25 different ways.
Right.
But they won a few World Series.
That's right. So chemistry's really out the window in baseball.
And so Reggie Jackson was a part of those teams who it was famously kind of
prickly.
Prickly. So in baseball, I was on some teams in the minor leagues. We had great chemistry.
Right.
Got along famously. But we were not good.
Yeah, terrible.
If you go check out the 1998 Beloit Snappers. I mean, the 1999 Stockton Ports. Off days we were cooking out. Right. I learned how to cook tri-tip in California. But we just didn't win ball games, right?
Yeah.
But we had great chemistry. Loved each other.
How about, I know you just played high school basketball. Is there chemistry there? You feel like other sports?
So I feel like baseball I think is different. I don't think it's good to have chemistry, good to have guys come up.
But it's not really going to determine whether you win or lose.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I think it matters a whole lot more in basketball and football.
I agree.
So similar, I played high school basketball. So I mean, not a super high level, right? But it matters because you're needing to know who's where on the court. Yeah. And the more you play with each other, the better you get. Yeah. You just kind of get to know guys' tendencies. Same thing in football. Yeah. You need to have that.
Hey, this guy's got this. This guy, hey, how this guy moves. This guy's a little bit slower here, or whatever.
Like the Broncos' offensive line for all those years didn't even announce themselves individually because they were a unit, right?
That's right.
There's a lot of things in those two sports because it is much more of a team sport than baseball.
Absolutely.
Where chemistry truly matters. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just knowing each other. So what was really interesting about chemistry? 5 years ago, my buddy lives in Charlotte. Got us tickets to the Charlotte Hornets versus the Lakers.
Pretty awesome.
Courtside. Like,
imagine Kobe was still rolling there.
So no, this was LeBron. So it's probably 4 years ago. I can't remember the exact date, but and so I was pumped. So this was like the Lakers in town. So every Julius Peppers was legitimately like 2 T seats over from me.
He's a big fella.
So I'll tell you the Pepper story after this. But the thing that I really noticed, I thought there would be a lot more communication, talking, calling switches, stuff like that. No. Not a lot of talking. Not a lot of verbal communication from what I heard. And I was literally on the court. Right. And I think it's because, one, they're running so hard up and down. Right. They're exerting so much effort. And then 2, they know where they practice so much together. They play so much together. They've got that chemistry built in, knowing like, right. Hey, you're
going to be here when you need.
He's going to be in the corner. Yeah. I'm going to drive, kick it out. Right? They know those things. So Julius Peppers.
Yes, let's hear this.
So he was legitimately sitting 2 seats down. So all like kind of the Charlotte royalty was, which is mostly Panthers players.
Right, and that's why you were there.
Yeah, that's why I was there.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, Peppers has been my guy. He was a Panther and
North Carolina born and raised.
North Carolina guy, and so. Halftime comes around, and I was trying not, but I was like, I just wanted to go say, hey, I appreciate who you've been for the Panthers. Right. So I walk over, and he's a little shorter than me actually. So I'm 6'6". He's just a touch short, but he played basketball at Carolina, good basketball player. Yeah. And so I shake his hand, and his hand just like swallowed, like big bear paw, big meaty hand, like.
And your hand's not small.
Yeah, and so I said, hey. Julius, hey, great to meet you. Just want to let you know, really appreciate what you've done for the Panthers. It's been so much fun watching you play all these years. He's like, just shakes my hand, gives me a head nod. Doesn't say anything.
I saw you.
I'm like,
all right, good deal.
So, as it happens, a guy that, so Ryan Sims, who was also on the same D line as Julius Peppers, also got drafted in the first round in 2002. I work with him. So I know. So I'm like, man, Pep didn't give me nothing. I'm gonna. So hey, man, I work with Ryan Sims. Doesn't say a word. I'm like,
what else I got? I ain't got nothing else.
I was like, this. I mean, I thought that would elicit like, oh, how is he?
Yeah,
or just start a conversation.
But he's not had to develop those skills.
He didn't say.
Yeah.
It, just kind of looked at me, kind of head nod. I'm like,
all right,
this guy does not want to talk to me. At all.
So did you just leave it?
So I just said, hey, nice to meet you, man, and just walked back to my seat.
Your seat.
Actually, I climbed under my seat and hid under the seat for the rest of the game. But that was a great time. If you get a chance to sit courtside, which is
I've been
really
probably
cool.
8 or 10 rows up, and the thing that took me with basketball is how great athletes they are.
Oh, amazing!
I mean,
yeah.
Their body and how their body works, and the big thing now in hitting and really in baseball in general is talking about sequencing and body control.
Yeah.
And their bodies just work so well together. I mean,
and the
court
looks so small too when you get down low. Because the passing lanes look so tiny because they're so big. But if you get a chance to go to that, really amazing. So another thing I want to bring up about super teams,
okay,
and how they are developed and built.
Yeah,
the draft. All right. So the Major League Baseball draft was instituted in 1965. You know who the first player ever drafted was?
No clue. No
okay.
Shots.
So I looked it up again, but I knew that Rick Monday.
Okay.
By the Oakland A's.
I didn't realize there wasn't. So there was no draft before.
There were some versions of it based on like signing bonuses, and there was
But essentially, all free.
There was kind of like a rudimentary Rule 5
kind of like
draft.
they do like a lot of like foreign players, Dominican players. So you kind of find the guy
basically
that you
everyone's
like.
a free agent. Yeah. So and that's why the Yankees were so good for so long.
Yeah.
Because they built, and you hear all these terms like bird dog scouts and things like that. Scouting back in the day was like
lifeblood.
Yeah,
I mean that's how you got good or wasn't good.
You have little, like they said, bird dog scouts in hometowns, just different things. Like scouts really, really mattered. Now you pop on YouTube and can see the best 12-year-old in the country or whatever it is, right? So 1965 draft, Rick Monday from Arizona State. In the 6th round that year, the A's also took Sal Bando. So those two became a big part of those 60s and 70s A's teams. 1966, the A's took Reggie Jackson with the 2nd overall pick. And then Gene Tennis later on. So that was kind of the core. So they built that team through the draft.
There was
and we see a lot of that still today. It's like we said with the Heat, like it was Dwayne Wade. He was their guy. And then they added the other two guys. So,
yeah.
So teams can do it through the draft. And we mentioned the Brewers earlier as kind of the golden standard now for that in baseball.
I feel like they do a really good job of knowing, like you got to bring your, and I feel like the Braves have done really good with this, where you bring up these core guys, and a lot of times you bring them up really young, and they seem to have figured out whatever model, shape, mode you need to be to have success early on. And then you can put little pieces around it if you need to, right? But not necessarily. I feel like I don't know. It's just my perception. Like I think about Giambi and some of those guys, the Yankees teams. I still go back. I know Pettit and Jeter and a lot of their core were draft guys, but man, it felt like they were pulling guys. How about Bernie? Was Bernie
Bernie's a Yankee guy.
Oh wow. Okay, so
I said, remember they brought in Randy Johnson. He didn't do great. Roger Clemens did pretty well.
Yeah.
Right. Mike Mussina did pretty well. David Cohn was a part of the.
All right. I needed you to come give me some more names because
I
was like, damn, it feels like there were more guys that they brought in.
But these guys, so Clemens was a guy, right?
Yeah.
David Cohn was a guy. David Wells was a guy.
Yeah.
But seemed like it was more on the pitching side. Mo Rivera. We didn't mention Mo.
Oh, yeah. And he was
he was a Yankee guy.
Pretty important. So you almost could go back to that and be like, yeah, their core hitters, but their core pitching staff was paid for.
Brought some guys in,
yeah. And they've always, so we can kind of take this a different way, right? Obviously, the salary caps and everything else. Do you want a salary cap in baseball after seeing Soto get $765 million?
No, salary cap's the worst. I mean, that's part of, we've talked about that a little bit.
I kind of would like to bring a salary minimum, but go ahead, finish
your
thought.
Yeah, salary minimum. You look at like Ohtani, so they're making more than the Oakland A's and the Pittsburgh Pirates and some other teams all combined, right? And not to say you have to do it that Ellie De La Cruz and O'Neill, they're going to get paid eventually.
Yeah.
Probably by the
not-
Yankees.
yeah,
probably
not-
by the Red
not
Sox.
by their
by
current
the Padres.
teams. Yeah.
Which is, and again, those teams, they have the ability to do that, but they don't want to stretch themselves that thin.
Yeah.
They've got the guys and girls and ownership groups. They're smart people. They're good business people. Baseball's a business for them.
Yeah.
They're there to make money.
Well,
And if they win, great.
Cohen essentially said, I've heard in interviews, that this is pretty much a philanthropic type of deal. Like
Yeah.
his goal, and he literally said this, his goal is to make millions of people happy. Right?
Yeah,
His goal
that's awesome.
isn't to make money on this endeavor, which kind of puts you in a different place. Like that
Yeah.
gives you a huge advantage. Hey, my goal is just to win.
Yeah.
And then you got all these other organizations, at least most of them, hey, I've got to make money, right? I need to make money. So it really puts it in it's an interesting dynamic not having a cap. But
it helps to be one of the richest people in the world and have that kind of...
being able to do that.
Let's see if Elon Musk will invest in it. Maybe he'll buy the Rays or something.
But, Houston's done a good job, too. I feel like they've done, there's maybe
They're
not
kind
super
of a super-
teams,
they're-
but
they're
they're
close.
really close.
But there's always going to be that shadow hanging over their head, or that cloud over their
and we can
head.
go there if we got time. You tell me, do we got time, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not as bothered by it, to be honest with you.
No?
I'm not as bothered by...
Because you're a hitter.
I'm a hitter. And honestly, I was a hitter that I did not want to know what was coming. And again, I didn't hit at that level, but I got some big league spring training games. I saw some stuff, and they were just throwing mostly fastball changeups. And I played in college and faced some pretty good guys. But then I never wanted to know, because my problem was, as a hitter, and those guys are obviously much better than I ever thought about being, but if I saw fastball and all of a sudden it wasn't fastball where I wanted it, I was still swinging. I'm really surprised, honestly, there was so much outrage. Especially baseball is a cheating sport unless you get caught.
Yeah. So
I'm not nearly as outraged by it, honestly.
I heard hitters tell me they would rather know location
100%.
than
Pitch.
I
agree 100%.
Inside, outside, that sort of thing. And I remember a guy, so Phil Kendall, a guy I played with for a couple years in the minor leagues. Anytime somebody got on second base, he thought they were stealing the signs.
Oh, yeah.
And
did he go to college?
no, he's a high school guy.
Oh, was he? Okay.
He was a high school guy.
That was what we were told to do as college guys. Your job on second base isn't necessarily to score from second base. Your job on second base is to steal signs. Yeah.
So as a pitcher, I had a really tough time seeing the signs because I have bad vision. So my signs were really kind of screwy. Like it was
catcher's legs real wide.
Or
were they doing touches?
Touches, pumps, a lot of different things. If a guy picked up my signs, like they were out there a while, and they were pretty smart.
Right.
Not that I'm a genius, but my signs were like most times like first sign after two or second sign. Nothing real, but mine were different. But so fast, I get to Double A, and Double A naturally you used to be able to hit.
That's right.
And so I got lucky, got on second base somehow, and so I'm like,
are you stealing signs? Are you thinking about it?
well, so I'm like, all right, let's see how easy this is to steal a sign.
Right.
And so I get my lead, and I hear the shortstop like shuffling behind me. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm thinking,
because you're not out there that often.
No,
you're a pitcher.
I haven't been out there since 1996. It's been a few years. So like legit 6 years since I've been on second base.
Oh gosh, I feel like that with my wife.
And then I'm trying to steal signs, and first of all, I can barely see the signs as a pitcher.
Right.
When I'm looking at them, I can't see anything. And then I got the shortstop back here
messing with you.
Yeah. I'm like, oh. So
you weren't stealing signs.
I was not. I was just happy to be out there taking a nice, safe lead.
I think there was a lot of faux outrage from the Astros. Again, there was a lot of players. Don't get me wrong. So clearly, I'm wrong on this, but there's a lot of players that current, and if I'd have played against them, maybe I'd have felt differently.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of players that were completely freaked out, thought it was the worst thing that ever could possibly happen. But there's a lot worse things that they could have been doing. I don't know. I'm glad they got caught. I'm glad, I'm glad there is a heel, right? We need a villain in baseball.
The Astros have been a heel.
They've been the villain. I like it. I like that they're the villain, not because I was really that upset, but it's because I like there being a little bit more on the line and a little bit more fired up to play them, and fans are a little bit chirpier. And so I wasn't. How bothered? Were you bothered? Were you like, oh gosh, this is? Were you number one? I wasn't surprised. Were you extremely surprised by any of it?
So I don't. If somebody steals my signs from second base, that's
fair game.
That's on me. Using the video, that's
the relay,
that's
the trash
kind
can.
Of a different. That's
yeah,
kind
and
of
obviously most people think like you did.
That's a higher level. That's taking things. If you can do it on the field, that's why. If somebody steals our signs, like we coach, you're at third base. If somebody steals our signs,
that's
Hey, good
on
for
me.
them. We need to change that up. The problem with our kids, I don't think they know the signs most of them.
Well, and if they do, sometimes they're on their own program.
I was coaching third, this fall, and I gave no steal, and there goes the kid. And then I gave a steal, nobody got. I was joking with the coach on the other side. I said, "Hey man, if you're trying to steal my signs, good luck. Good luck,
because my kids they're doing the opposite.
Because they don't even know what they are right now. So,
so circling it back in, super teams are good. So we agree
they're good. Yeah.
So through these, kind of little mini conversations,
I want to bring
we got steroids.
I want to bring up one more thing. Yeah. One more thing. So the other thing that created a semi-super team in the 1950s, baseball.
Okay.
Integration. The Brooklyn Dodgers clearly signed Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
They had Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, a pitcher, right? So I was actually, again, I tell you I'm a big baseball nerd.
Yeah.
Apple TV, Apple Play, whatever it's called. They have old baseball games like archived.
Like 50s?
1955 is as far back. So I was watching the 1955 Game 7 World Series the other night.
Holy! I mean, who was in it? I don't even know who was in it.
The Yankees versus Dodgers. So the Brooklyn Dodgers won. It was Game 7. The Dodgers won in 7 games. I got through half. I still want to watch the end of it, but really fascinating to watch that game and see how the game.
How did it look different than today's game? I mean,
so Joshua and I were watching it together. So uniforms different, right? Bag, gear, wool. Baseball hats, no helmets. Just from the aesthetic, right?
Right.
But the thing I really noticed, a lot of Gil Hodges was batting like 4 bunted for the Dodgers.
Wow.
More bunting for the hits, that sort of thing. And it wasn't great camera work, right? It was kind of from behind and up top, and it was kind of
the frame speed's probably different,
tough
so it
to
looks
see
a
some
little
ball
bit
strikes,
goofy.
but those were the things. Pretty good pitching, pretty good defense.
So integration caused.
So I think integration. I don't know if it was considered a super team, but certainly gave them a leg up.
I mean, when you talk about how many Hall of Famers, and you almost could have went that route, right, with defining how super teams. You couldn't have went to the Golden State because those guys aren't done, but you could have went to some of those other teams and been like, how many Hall of Famers played together at one time?
Yeah.
Right, and when you think about those teams, and Jackie and some of those guys ended up obviously Hall of Famers.
Yeah, clearly.
And
so that was one thing that I really noticed, kind of when, especially with baseball, like looking at that, it was like, man, integration. Branch Rickey was clearly revolutionary, clearly
still behind, but revolutionary.
But Branch Rickey was about winning ball games, black, white,
which
yellow,
is
brown,
obviously the way it should have been, and then that was a interesting time in our history. But to realize, in one aspect, 1955 seems like a long time ago. And then another aspect, it's like it's not
too terribly far.
Yeah.
So one team we haven't brought up at all.
Okay.
And one of my favorite super teams growing up, the Bulls of the 90s.
Yeah, dude, that's funny, dude. I researched this and Googled it and chatted it and all the avenues to be able to cheat and give myself good notes to look at, and the Bulls never came up.
Really?
The Bulls never came on any of these, and it should have, right? The ones that came up were Golden State, were Miami. I think
you got a bad
maybe how I defined it.
Yeah.
Because it was how I defined it more was it had to be free agents. And Jordan carried us. Jordan and Pippen.
So they had the 2 3-peats.
Yeah. Which is obviously a dynasty.
The first was Jordan, Pippen, Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, that group.
Yeah.
With some others, and that B.J. Armstrong and a couple others, right? So that one I would say was truly like organic. Those
Right.
were Bulls guys. The second one though, so I'm of that era. Like Jordan's the
yeah.
greatest player for me.
No, 100%.
But the second one, that was probably one of the early-ish super teams, right?
Coach, you had Dennis.
We had Jordan. So he took the kind of year and a half hiatus. Pippen was still there. Dennis Rodman comes in from the
Detroit.
Pistons.
Yep.
They bring in Tony Kukoc, who was the best European player at the time, and then Ron Harper, who was a really good NBA player.
A lot of people thought he was going to be like a mini Jordan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I know a lot of people from my generation like to argue that Jordan did it, but that second three-peat was they brought some guys in.
Yeah, and I think it hits to, in all sports, but especially in those more team-centric sports, you can't do it by yourself, right? Jordan obviously didn't win it by himself, but that's funny. Obviously a dynasty. Your core piece was drafted by the Bulls. I think maybe is the reason it had slipped out of mind.
Yeah.
But you could argue Golden State's was. You could argue, honestly, Miami Heat's was with Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
You could argue the Yankees with theirs always had a core piece. And I learned something. So before, 1965?
65 was the
So there was no draft. So
what we know as the draft. There was some variations of it, but that was...
Yeah, so before that, essentially they were just doing their job better and had more money. And in the right market. So that's interesting. You really can't include, based on my definition, you really can't, include those 20s teams, right? Even though they did it because of free agents, but there was no draft. They were just out working and maybe obviously outspending guys a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting though. I think I would almost go to the point where I don't know if you always want, I do think there is some fatigue. I don't think you want as a fan, not as a fan, as a fan of the sport, but not a fan of any particular team. I don't know if you want one team to always be there. But I do think you want some teams that have some longevity of 5, 6, 7, 8 years of success because you want that heel, you want that villain, you want somebody to pull against.
I don't want to see a new team every year.
That's interesting. So you do not.
I like teams being good.
But you're a traditional guy, right?
No
handshakes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Get the handshakes out of here. Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to see. Well, I can say this: like the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm not a. They do a really good job, but it feels like there's a lot of competitive teams over different periods of years. It just seems like the Yankees are always there, the Braves are always there. The Dodgers are going to be there now for a long period of time. So.
All right, but we talked about viewership and attendance and that thing.
Yeah.
The Royals went to back-to-back World Series in the mid.
That's a great point.
Did anybody care about that?
No.
Nah, nobody wants to see that. The Royals almost went this year.
Yeah.
Bobby Witt Jr. might be the best player in baseball. Top 5, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to see the Royals. They wanted to see the Yankees, and they wanted to see the Dodgers.
I think that may be. It kind of hit on this, and so viewership. I've got viewership numbers just for the last few years. So viewership of World Series, and this is kind of a bad trend. It goes back to 2022. Viewership of World Series in 2017, 18.7. Viewership of 2019 World Series, 14.3. 2022, 11.8.
So going backwards.
Yeah, we're going backwards. That's why Golden Helmet. That's why
going at bat.
Yeah, Golden at bat. That's why pitch clock.
Pitch clock. We'll talk about pitch clock another time.
I think all those things, and then you talk about regular season games, and this is specific around the Astros because they were one of the teams that came up as a super team.
Yeah.
From 2017 to 2019, their average viewership is 3.5 to 4.2, and so that's pretty low when you compare it to other sports. Obviously, a bunch of games that are being played, so it's not really comparing apples to apples. But the idea is that the viewership isn't going in the right direction, and those super teams do help that viewership.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, this is our pod about super teams. We hope you all have enjoyed this. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. We got an Instagram. We got a TikTok. You can find us on Apple Pods, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We appreciate you guys out there listening. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And please be sure to share this with your friends, family, get it out there. And we love doing this for you guys, and look forward to bringing you more content.
Oh, go Pack.